EquiDirectory, the largest horse business directory in Australia and New Zealand, where more than 5,000 other equestrians have listed their business. Become more rider-focused, improve your position, increase your effectiveness and stay motivated with Jacqui Van Montfrans from the Riders Coach, your online coach and mentor.
Hello, I'm Yvette Montgomery and welcome to our new Dressage Test Dressage Diagrams webinar. I'm here with our special guest speaker, Jacqui Van Montfrans, and webinar coordinator, Amber McGoldrick. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining me on this wild ride and being here today. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself and my business. I'm the owner and creator of EquiDirectory, which is an online horse business directory and marketplace. I'm also the creator of the e-dressage test diagram booklet for prep to advanced tests. Now I can truly say the response that I have received so far has been amazing. We have had well over 1,500 downloads. And so I'd just like to thank everybody that's downloaded the book. Next, I'll be working on the para-equestrian rider test. When Equestrian Australia have finalised them, then I'll do the FEI test. I've also had a request to do the judges' version from their perspective. Next, I'd like to say a big thank you to the businesses and individuals who have supported the development of the e-dressage diagram ebook. You may have noticed some advertising throughout. These are the special sponsors that made the free ebook a reality. Some businesses have offered a special discount, so please show your support and click on the ads in the ebook and it will take you directly to their website. Next, I wanted to formally introduce to you our guest speaker, Jacqui Van Montfrans. Jacqui comes with experience accumulated over more than 35 years of training, competition, performance, education, both from home and abroad. Jacqui is an EA Level 2 dressage specialist, performance coach, coach educator, FEI rider and trainer, and Australian representative. She's also known as the Riders Coach. EquiDirectory is pleased and honoured to have Jacqui Van Montfrans here today as our special guest. So thank you and welcome, Jacqui.
Hey, Yvette, thanks so much. And thanks for having me on board. I know what a massive task this has been for you. And yeah, just the e-dressage test book diagram, the webinar, all fantastic initiatives, the support you've had from your sponsors. It's really, really fantastic. We've got a lot of people on board today, judges, riders, coaches. So thank you all for joining us. I just think the number of downloads you've had already is testament to the fact you're providing an outstanding and much needed service. Just a quick shout out as well to Amber McGoldrick, our webinar coordinator and general solver of problems. I know you're sitting in there, Amber, nice and quietly, but you're, just making sure questions are answered and that people can get on without a hiccup and that we can get this event on the road. So thank you as well. Absolute labour of love. And both of you are a great give back to the sport. So thanks. All right, just a quick one. The information that we are sharing today is purely for information and doesn't constitute advice. But other than that, please sit back and enjoy, write some notes, some questions, and we will have a short question and answer session once we've completed talking about the prep to novice, and then we'll move on to talk through the rest of the levels and have another short Q&A session thereafter. But what I do also want to just mention at the outset is that today's discussions don't just target the competition rider. So some riders do train to compete. There are others using test riding to prove their training. Some are looking for a bit of motivation to their training or just to build the confidence around the test riding. Equally, we have coaches looking for ways to motivate riders and build training programs, whether that's at prep or high performance level. Also, from just discussions with judges, there seems to be so much interest now expressed by judges coming through the levels, wanting to broaden their own understanding of the training requirements. This in turn means, they can comment, more accurately and reflect horse and rider combination readiness for the next level. So I'd like to applaud that as well. In addition to going through the changes to the tests today, I'm going to be sharing some training insights so that it makes it a little more relevant. A lot of people, can make sense of the geographical changes, but we're going to look at how to read and interpret the test sheets in their entirety, how to apply these interpretations in ways that are useful to riders, coaches, and judges alike. All right. So we've got, just as a quick overview, we're going to be talking about how the changes to the test movements are made, the geographical changes, changes to verbiage and purpose, why the changes have been made. Then we'll get on to talking about some training tips for better test writing, and then go through the levels prep to advanced. In fact, I think the training tips will probably talk a bit more toward the end, just in case there's anyone who doesn't have time to sit through the whole lot today. Remember too, it is being recorded, so you can always refer to it again afterwards. And then we'll just do a bit of a summary of what we've talked about today. So first up, how the changes to the test movements were made. The US Equestrian Federation and Dressage Federation panel of trainers, coaches and judges and riders in the US all went through a process of analysing and rewriting the tests, and it's a process that takes about 3 years actually. So every time we have the new tests kick in, not long after, they're already starting to review everything. The tests themselves, once they're written, are actually written by professionals, amateur riders and junior riders, and then they see how the test flows, and then the process of the revisions come in. So it's quite a big effort. And remember too, the tests are designed to be a logical sequence to the horse's training and the rider's education. When we're looking at the geographical or pattern changes, they're, I guess, fairly obvious because they've been marked in red in the new tests. At some levels, the changes are really obvious. Some of the tests, they're more subtle. One of the harder things to do for riders who have written the tests a lot is actually going to be reprogramming the subtle changes if you've written them and committed them to memory. So it's a good thing to have a good look in detail. The other thing to note is that where it's written in blue indicates that the movement doesn't end until the next one begins. So it's we'll talk a bit more about that as we go through each level, but an example might be a 15-meter circle in a novice test includes the long side until the next numbered movement's indicated. The main thing I really wanted to spend a bit of time on today is the changes to verbiage and purpose. The movements being introduced should form part of your training objectives. So that's right at the top of your test sheet there. Ideally, you're competing at the level below or the test prior, as each test does build on the next. And don't only look at the navigational instructions, look at the purpose, understand the judge's expectations by looking at the directives. So when you hear yourself saying something like, oh, the new tests aren't that different, or just, skip elementary, or pre-St. George is easier than advanced, you're only looking at the patterns. The purpose and the directives are those things that judges are looking for. They're the things that underpin all of your training objectives. So they prove the basics. The purpose, so if you've got your tests in front of you there, each level at the top there will tell you what the purpose is. And I don't know that these are read as much as what they could be, but it tells you the goal. It's indicating that the horse must demonstrate the correct basics. The judge's expectations and the marks they award in turn give you as the rider or you know, your riders, if you're a coach, it gives them feedback around their readiness for the next level. And that's really very different to simply being able to navigate the pattern. You know, again, look at the columns and think of the first three columns as the pattern or the navigational directions, similar to what you'd have in your nav in your car. It's just giving you directions. The test is what you see in the fourth column. So again, just a nice coaching approach, I think, is when people say, oh, you know, I don't like writing the test. And it's kind of like, well, hang on a second. You're writing a pattern, and within the pattern lies the test. So it's just a good way to reword it. Can you bring your training objectives into that pattern? So another example might be at elementary. It proves that the horse and rider have the coordination and timing to develop the straightness and collection required to perform a flying change and a half pass. So in other words, medium readiness. Now, it doesn't mean Grand Prix collection. It just means enough through the simple changes to show that a flying change is possible and your half passes are possible. It also proves a sound knowledge of the fundamentals of the training scale. And I love talking about the training scale, so I'll try not to go off on too many tangents today. We'll run another webinar on that. If your horse loses the ability to maintain rhythm, suppleness and relaxation of the back, and acceptance of the contact, for example, throughout your counter canter or your simple changes, it points to a training issue. It doesn't point to an issue with the test. So yeah, use the movements that are being introduced at the next level to form a conversation with your coach about your readiness to begin learning these things. Equally, coaches, you're able to assist your riders formulate training and outcomes and competition plans using these tests. It also shows the ability to confirm, or by you showing the ability to confirm the purpose, achieve the directives, and ride with accuracy. So that's the pattern. That's where you enhance your collective marks as well. That's another good one to sit with, is having a read of what the collective marks are actually asking for. So as to why these changes are made, that's what we'll talk about now at each level, and discuss a bit about what and why the changes were made, how the changes point to the training progression of the horse and rider, and so on. Okay, so elementary. I'll be, I guess, repeating some of the things we already talked about for prep to novice. But first up, just as an overview of the elementary tests, the first test, 3-1, the simple change, the last simple change has been removed and it's been replaced with a transition to trot. So that's movement number 18, I believe. Again, the writing in blue very much indicates where the mark will be allocated, where the movement begins, where the movement ends. Test number 2 has also been reworked. So this indicates it's pretty much a new test. And test number 3, we've actually got no changes to the pattern, but just to note that EA did elect to use the phrase collect. So the dressage committee has made that, it's just a slight change or difference to the US tests. The phrase collect in preference to shorten the walk in preparation for the half turns. That's for movements number 13 and 14. And then the walk again notes overtrack. This is a theme throughout. All right, so just a reminder about this whole business that a movement doesn't end until the next begins. That's always marked in blue on your test sheets. This is probably important too, when you're looking back on a test and thinking, oh, but I did a really good, a halt. but perhaps you lost a mark where that movement continued to the next. When it comes to elementary, I could talk about this for a while. There just seems to be a trend where riders are being encouraged to skip elementary, and I know why this happens. It's often when preparation for flying changes is beginning, and suddenly the horse seems to forget everything it ever knew about anything else, and everything in this horse's world suddenly means flying changes. Counter becomes tricky, tension comes in, simple changes and so on. But honestly, even if you needed to step out of the official competition ring at elementary for a moment while the horse goes through that phase of thinking the flying change is so very exciting, don't skip it completely. And at the very least, make sure you're still training it at home, because it just adds another layer to those foundational requirements at medium. And I'm going to say even foundational requirements as you continue to move through to advance. Anything you skip now is just going to have a compounding effect down the track. So if you hear yourself saying, I'm going to skip a level, you need to ask yourself, well, what is it that's so difficult or confronting or frustrating in that test, and why am I avoiding it, and what should I be doing about it? It's really such a vital transition into medium advanced. The rider as well, it's not just the horse, it's for the rider to develop timing, balance, coordination, and even the skills to initiate the flying change training. There's a lot that goes into a flying change, and that initial introduction into flying changes, if you're set up in the best way possible as a rider, you're going to give your horse the best experience as well. And it's also part of the progression to collection. So we start seeing more requirements about carrying power. How are you developing the carrying power and not just the push power? Again, go through those training scale requirements. Am I meeting those requirements? Are the basics being evidenced? So the collection, don't think of it as Grand Prix collection. I think that's also where a bit of a mistake is made, that all of a sudden you have to have the horse looking like a Grand Prix horse. It's not the case. It's an introduction to collection. And then it continues to increase through the levels. For the same reason, 3-1 is shorter. It's not asking the horse and rider to maintain that physical effort and focus for quite as long. The simple changes have been replaced with canter to trot transitions to encourage better flow. And then your 3-2, a medium trot's been added into the middle now to help refresh the paces again, which then helps to find the flow in the laterals. Look at these things in the test and say, right, why are they in the test? Okay, I've got to do these things in training as well. Make sure I continually refresh the paces when I'm schooling a particular movement. It's also interesting to note the differences between the US and Australian tests at this level. I was listening to a podcast on Dressage Radio with FEI 4-star judge Christy Wysocki. I'm not sure if I got her surname pronounced correctly, but she's also on the USDF test riding task force. And it was decided with that task force that there's too much tension shown in the instruction where it says shorten the walk prior to the canter transition. They've opted to remove that. And in fact, they really encourage riders to opt for a very good medium walk into the canter to promote the purity of the pace. Now, from a training perspective, remember the long game is more important. So as much as our tests are still requiring shorten the walk, don't do it at the expense of losing the basics. So, as a rider, you need to work with your coach to decide on what the best walk is for you and your horse at that moment in time, and look at being able to progress that ability to shorten the walk, rather than what we see a lot is, okay, shorten the walk now, and tension comes in and the purity of the walk's lost. So I always say, decide what you'd rather lose a mark for. If you know that that your horse generally gets a little tense still when you start to shorten the walk, make the decision and say, I don't want to lose the mark because of tension in the walk. I actually would rather lose the mark because I didn't show enough shortening of the pace. In the long run, it's a better outcome. So yeah, just choose your poison. The other thing is that the phrase collect has also replaced shorten the walk in preparation for your half turns. Here's another one that I like to think about is when you're talking about collecting in preparation for the half turns, is starting to think about the walk stride becoming steps. And this is a really good one for coaches, I think, as well, that it gives the riders the visual of the steps shortening, and rather than it being a walk stride that they're trying to turn sideways. So the other thing that's being demonstrated, or that you should be demonstrating, is the readiness for medium level. So in other words, a judge is going to score you and your horse as a combination well if you're indicating readiness for the next level. If you come back from your comps and you're kind of like, I'm still just sitting at low 60s, the overall of that, sometimes there's just a really expensive mistake or two that's been made and you can rationalize that. But in overall terms, the judge is, what they're seeing on the day is saying that the readiness for the next level isn't quite there to compete at the next level. I like to think that if you're consistently hitting that 65 to 70%, that's saying, you know what, medium level, definitely ready for that. Okay. And just one other thing, it's not just about the pattern. Don't only think about the pattern, even though riding with accuracy is super important. It does give you the marks. It's what training strengths, what can you show off? How much can you show that your basics are so correct within that pattern? So we'll move on to medium. Now, the medium, there's not really any changes to the patterns. It's more about the changes to the verbiage, particularly around the walk. So very similar to what we just talked about in elementary. Shorten the walk's been replaced with collect prior to your pirouettes or half pirouettes, as well as your walk to canter transitions. And coefficients have been added for the flying changes, and that already starts at test number 1. So what this is saying is the flying changes are a really, really important foundation. I'm going to say I've equally heard it said, and there's exceptions to this rule. I'll be the first one to say I coach some riders with wonderful old schoolmasters who have a late change. You're not going to muck with that late change. It just causes way too much tension. The horse has been allowed to do this change its entire life that way, and you just upset everything by trying to make that change clean. But the rider needs or wants the mileage at medium level, and you might say, you know what, go and ride the medium, accept the fact you're going to get marked down for the late change, but there's a whole bunch of other things that can be ridden really well. You get to become familiar with that track. You get to gain an understanding of what it's going to take your next horse through those levels. And in fact, it can even highlight why that late change has become a very well-developed late change over the horse's lifespan. But in general terms, it's saying don't come through to medium level unless your changes are showing, are looking to be quite, they don't have to be super established necessarily, but pretty much showing that both horse and rider understand the preparation, understand the aid, and then can show balance after the change as well. The walk, the changes are the same as those discussed at elementary. From a training point of view, I think that the US tests using the phrase steps. So again, the same thing as we were talking about in elementary, that if you were to coach this using the word steps, I think does help with the preparation for the half turns and the half pirouettes. So yeah, just another one to note at medium level. I think one of the most common errors in a half turn or a half piro is that the walk slows down. So the walk stride stays large but slows down instead of becoming shortened steps. So if you were to progress that on and say, what are we looking for? Okay, it's the horse's ability to even show traveling short steps not far from here. So those two things can start to be linked in. And then when the walk is only being slowed, the rider's still trying to use the turn to collect the horse more. And that's when the mistakes of stepping wide, crossing over, and grounding come in, because the true collection in the steps hasn't been established before the turn. If anything, by the time you're turning a walk pirouette, you should be able to push for more impulsion, straightness, and collection in a forward manner, rather than what you see a lot, which is the rider still wanting to bring the horse back and back and back and push more. There's too much room for error in it. All right, so just on the screen here, looking at the 4.2, this is what I was talking about here: collect and half pirouette right, and then collect and half pirouette left. So it's that ability to show that clear shortening, activating of the walk stride without loss of rhythm, without tension building, and that as you go into the Piro, the horse is able to stay uphill and light in the forehand. And then you've got to again collect the stride in walk before taking the collected canter onto the right lead. All right, so this, I think as well, look for advanced readiness. All of this comes into play in exactly the same way at advanced level for canter piros. So a rider's understanding around what it means to truly collect the stride or truly collect before the piros or the strike off, it all comes into play again at advanced. So talking about advanced, we'll continue on to the advanced tests. So test 1, completely reworked. So again, it's a new test. The extended canter in test number 2 is now before the quarter piros, and the coefficients have been moved. So test 3 also reworked, new test, and the half 10-meter circles in true and counter canter have been removed. I'm going to say that is one of my favorite training movements. So just because it's not in the test, don't not ride it. It was in one of the St. George tests many, many years ago. And, it proves so much. And I won't go off into a tangent here, but please look at that movement and say, all right, it's not in the test, but the reason it's no longer in the test is actually because they needed to shorten the tests. It isn't because they thought that the movement wasn't a good movement. I know also actually there's some other modifications that EA have slightly different to the USDF floor plan, just to include some more counter-canter after the half pirouettes in canter, just as a good preparation for the pre-St. George. So if you look at, I'll bring it up on the screen here, in 5.3, numbers 17 and 20, or actually you'll have to look at it on your test sheet. We couldn't fit it all in on the screen here, but yeah, those counter-canters into the flying change are very much in preparation for your St. George. Again, I hear it a lot. Oh, what was the 5C? It's so tricky. Just skip it. Just go to pre-St. George. Well, if pre-St. George is kind of like your final outcome for your riding, and that's pretty much where you want to sit, yes, you could probably get away with that. But again, you're only looking at the pattern. So if you look at the test diagrams, Yvette's included the caller notes. You may as well just look at the caller notes. Don't even worry about looking at the rest of the test sheet if that's what you want to do. But if you want to use the tests to enhance your training, to enhance your understanding, to really achieve all of those directives, then, you know, don't skip these things. At least make sure in your training, you're going back to them and saying, I have to work out why these movements are important. Why have they been included in tests? So yeah, that half 10 in true and counter canter, brilliant training exercise. And, you know, just the progression in these tests, I think that's really great. It prevents you becoming too focused on the turning, for example, in the canter pirouettes, and it focuses instead on the preparation and shortening before the turn, as well as the control of the turn. And it means in your training again, right, I need to look at what does the preparation look like. I need to have a canter that can truly shorten and sit before I start turning, whereas most pirouettes, the shortening is still happening on the turning, and then the horse can't lower the croup effectively. The other thing that I like to talk about a lot in all of this assessing what the test movements are telling us or pointing us to in the training is considering the horse's long-term soundness. So soundness of body, soundness of mind. Where there's a logical progression and where you're listening to the horse and what it's telling you about how it's performing these movements, in the long run, they will give you twice as much back if you sit with the training difficulty that might be presenting and find exercises and ways to have the movement easier to perform in that test riding situation, rather than believing that somehow it will remedy itself as long as you just keep going through the levels. This level of advance, it has so many specifics that if you only look at the pattern, you are going to miss the detail you need for the training, in particular, developing the quality of the pace as those technical difficulties increase. So again, 5.3, it's not just preparing you for medium, beg your pardon, it's not just preparing you for St. George, it's actually preparing you for small tour, St. George and into one readiness. I'm even going to say it's going to help to give you a foothold into FEI medium. There's a few things in there that if you overlook them, they catch up with you then. All right. The the quality of the pace, I did go off on a little tangent there, as promised. I'll have to say the quality of the pace development is a big one for trainers, judges to really start to have that reflected in comments. Don't forego the quality of the pace simply to achieve the movement that's required of you in the test. Even the tests themselves. So for example, the changes now in the 5-3 have been put between the puros as a way of rejuvenating the canter so that there's energy for the next pirouette. Then when you go to St. George, the puros come back to back, but what you're doing then is taking that same training methodology and saying, where do I find my rejuvenation in the canter within the St. George? Because the 5-3 is telling me that rejuvenating the canter makes the second puro better. All right, so I think I've pretty much covered off. Amber, do we have any questions that have come through for elementary to advanced?
Okay, we've just got one more question. So this is from
Yes.
Bronte. So in the advanced 5-1, half pass to the wall at E, her horse did a flying change. She wants to know, is it best to fly change back to achieve counter canter, or do a walk to counter canter, then fly?
So look, I would, from a training perspective, I would say come back to walk and re-establish the correct canter lead, because you're letting the horse know you need them to wait to do flying changes. The horse is a little bit excited about the idea of a flying change. You're going to lose the mark anyway. My preference would be to say, come back to walk and as smoothly as possible, pick up that counter canter again. Look, if the horse is super, super happy to change back, but sometimes that starts to trigger a bit of we must be doing sequences now. So my advice there or recommendation there would be come back to walk and reestablish. Good question. All right. So some training tips. Practice, print, and develop. So I'm a fan of mantras. What I mean by practice is practice your test writing weekly as part of your training at home. Do things like print and laminate your EquiDirectory dressage tests, your diagrams, if that's your preferred learning style, or the test paper itself, or even just the caller instructions if you want just really the basic directional moves, and stick it on your arena fence or the wall or in your tack room if it's not practicable to put it anywhere near your arena, but just somewhere it's easy reference, or print it and don't laminate it. Just have the folded piece of paper in your pocket or on your phone, just something that's going to prompt you to go, I've committed to today being my test writing day, or I'm a little bit short on motivation, I don't know what to do today. Walk up to that test and go, that's what I'm going to do, or that section of the test is what I'm going to do. So practice, print, and then go ahead and develop a weekly and monthly training program that is designed to land you at your competition day. One is feeling prepared, knowing what your best possible outcome would be. And again, you'll hear it a lot. Just go for it. Just relax. There is no such thing. Those things aren't measurable, and you haven't gone in feeling prepared for that. They're certainly not repeatable and generally not attainable on the day. It's having that knowledge of, this is the best possible test that I can ride today at home, and that week before the comp, I am changing nothing. I'm going to show my strengths and know that those weaker points might just have to have a mark less here or there. And if you come out of the test and review it and you go, I rode the test as I would ride it at home, that's a win. And your training program also needs to include dress rehearsals. And by that, I mean, you decide Wednesday, test riding day, I'm getting up to the arena, I'm going to give myself 20 minutes warm up, then I'm going to run through the test as I would in the warm-up arena at a competition, and then I'm going to run through it as if it was for the judge beginning to end. So dress rehearsals are a big one. All right, now remember, your tests are, those tests papers, they are seriously the ultimate cheat sheet. It's telling you everything you could possibly need to know. It's not like walking into an exam and you have no idea what's going to be asked of you. You know everything by reading those test papers. And if you're not sure, ask your coach. In fact, I love it when I get questions about, oh, I rode through this test and not sure if I'm getting this, or what do they mean in the directives when they're talking about X, Y, Z. You know, start some good conversations with your coach. And the other thing is, make it really easy for the judge to award marks. Those basics again. You know, it's so easy to get caught up on little details. I think sometimes people spend more time worrying about how their plats are looking than on the day, than actually going, no, I know this is how I rode the test at home. I know that the judge just needs me to make it easy to award those marks. But again, that all comes in that preparation of having a training plan at home. You know, build a list of training objectives based on the purpose that you read on those test papers at each level. Writing a test each week also brings a bit of variety to your training programs, and it's going to highlight where you might need to address some things in your training. You video your test. There's so many ways now with PIVOs, PICSIMs, and so on, that you don't need to ask some poor long-suffering soul to stand there and video for you for 40 minutes in the arena. But even if it's just your test, and then you self-analyze it, and then you do your dress rehearsal. I think most riders only ever watch the test that they rode at the competition. So put the same type of pressure and expectation in place. Wear the same boots, have the same saddle cloth and bridle. You know, don't just have your competition gear for the day of the competition. It feels different. The horse responds differently to it. You know, a classic is if you're competing in tails for the first time, or your boots are brand new, you know, ride in them at home as regularly as possible so that there's no surprises on the day. The other one is, in that training, in your dress rehearsal, in your everyday training, develop mindfulness. So your mental skills training, your visualization techniques, they all have to happen at home, and you need to be given these strategies already at home so that you can practice those during your dress rehearsal. By the time you're at the comp and being told to just relax, I don't know about you, but that makes me even more nervous. So, you know, it's like any other skill, you need to exercise it with intention. Enter online competitions, get the feedback, use it for goal setting, it helps you ride with that intention that I'm talking about. And it also helps you to prepare for that next competition that you might actually be wanting to ride at. So this whole thing, you know, train with intention in your everyday riding. Don't just repeat the test movements. There needs to be exercises you do to improve the test movements. They are what the exercises help you achieve your purpose. They prove the basics, and then you get to develop your timing and coordination as a rider. But just to summarize today, testing the training and training the test. So use your tests as roadmaps to training. Use the test riding to prove your training, and your training to improve the test. So the two things work together and off one another. Your test papers, ultimate cheat sheet. Read the purpose, confirm the purpose. Look at what's being introduced at each level to point to your training requirements, and look at the directives as the test, and the pattern as the GPS coordinates. So what's being tested? It's not just the pattern, it's the basics. Again, the directives, understand them, and you'll know what the judges are looking for. Make sure you're confirming the purpose that's written at the top of each of those sheets, and particularly to answer that question about your own readiness for the next level, adhere to the importance of establishing basics again at each level. So the training scale isn't just number 1 through 6 and it's done. That whole scale repeats itself again at every level, and that's what's meant by checking in with the basics all the time. When you achieve your purpose, when directives and accuracy are all there, that's what's proving your basics. So yes, accuracy is rewarded, but it's not rewarded at the expense of your collectives. And that's where we talked about the quality of the paces and so on. Anything that you find yourself avoiding, embrace your nemesis and choose the exercises that are going to fix the problem. Don't repeat the movement over and over and hope that it makes the problem go away. Ride to a weekly training plan. Practice your test riding weekly and ride with intention daily. If you take nothing away from today other than that, practice your test riding weekly, ride with intention daily. That's where you'll improve. Use your tests and your diagrams as a training tool by having them easily accessible. I mean, an ebook, it couldn't be easier, have your phone at the side of the arena. Use the diagrams to aid with visualization. I think that's a really great one that this dressage diagrams book gives you. Do your dress rehearsals, and within those dress rehearsals, what are you doing with the mental skills training as part of that? All right, I think it's time. I'm going to hand back over to Yvette, but I think everyone on board today would agree that the e-dressage diagram test book, as well as this event, is really quite incredible value, and it's not possible to do that without our sponsors. So I know I'm speaking for both Yvette and Amber when we say we'd be super grateful to have you as attendees and recipients of the e-test book to connect with the sponsors. You'll find them in the e-test book, but just, simple things like follow them on social media platforms, drop a comment or send them a message acknowledging their support. And that should ensure continued delivery of these types of initiatives. Your feedback's always welcome. I know we're looking at the possibility of running a in-depth question and answer type webinar, or of course we'd invite your feedback on anything you'd like as far as webinars go to expand upon and have some good conversations around. And so thanks so much for being on board. And Yvette, it's over to you.
Excellent. All right, so that's it. I've just got a couple of tiny little things. Thank you, everyone, especially Jacqui, for your time. We are very lucky to be able to get an oversight on the new dressage test changes. Following the webinar will be embedded into the ebook, so you can watch and rewatch it whenever you need to. Order your ebook on our website, and you'll receive the current version, and then you'll receive the new one when it's ready to go as well. We're going to hold a live Q&A at a later date, and we'll get you to submit specific questions beforehand. So Jacqui will be able to answer them for you. We'll also send out a couple of special introductory offers in the coming days or week. And also, that's it. Just make sure you download your dressage diagram book so you stay in the loop. If there's anything else we can help you with, you've got any other ideas or anything you would like covered, please let us know. But that's it. Thank you.
Become more rider focused, improve your position, increase your effectiveness and stay motivated with Jacqui Van Montfrans from the Riders Coach, your online coach and mentor. EquiDirectory is the largest horse business directory in Australia and New Zealand, where more than 5,000 other equestrians have listed their business.